Washington, D.C. on the Food Business Network satellite system. This is Food Business Today.
Good morning. Snow, rain, sleet, and cold. You name it, the eastern seaboard had it yesterday. Snow fell from the Great Lakes region to New England, down to North Carolina, and rain and freezing temperatures were the rule in much of the southeast. The snow walloped Washington, D.C., more than a foot of snow by this morning. The deluge closed Washington National Airport in the nation's capital and other airports in other cities. Many schools were closed. Some Veterans Day activities had to be canceled. The storm, which surprised many forecasters with its fury, also is blamed for 9 deaths, 7 resulting from traffic accidents, 2 from freezing temperatures. About the only benefit was that the storm doused wildfires throughout much of the South. But officials say it's too early to tell whether the snow and rain will permanently end the fires that have burned more than 350,000 acres of woodland. Also in the South, farmers are keeping a close eye on the thermometer. Overnight freeze advisories were issued for nearly all of Georgia, southern Alabama, and portions of northwest Florida. And cold temperatures weren't the only problem in North Carolina, where snow fell across the central and western part of that state, reaching 2 inches in some areas. Snow and more snow. That's also the substance of our FBN weather report. Meteorologist Gordon Barnes has the dismal details on yesterday's autumn blizzard, along with his national weather forecast. Gordon himself had some trouble with the snow, but still managed to file this report by telephone. Gordon?
Peter, I think everyone today, especially in the Middle Atlantic and Northeastern states, will be talking about the record snowfall of yesterday and last night. It really paralyzed not only ground travel, but air travel as well. And any of our viewers who are planning to travel into those regions should really check with the airlines to make sure everything is operational before starting out. Snowfall amounts range anywhere from 6 to 16 inches in and around the immediate Washington area, about the same through Baltimore, and lesser amounts as you move up the coast. However, the storm system that caused all the adverse weather yesterday and last night is now moving up off the New England coastline. This is going to result in some cloudy weather today along the coastal sections of New England, a likelihood of some snow as well, although it's possible that sleet or rain could mix in with the snow at times. High pressure now located over the southeastern states will keep bright sunny skies over the southeastern states and will bring sunshine back to the Mid-Atlantic states, and temperatures will be cool, but they'll be above freezing, and as a result, the snow will start to melt, and we can look forward to improving conditions. Pleasant weather along the Gulf coastal states. It'll also remain sunny and warm through the desert southwest, while in the Pacific Northwest and into portions of the northern Rockies, some rain can be expected, and temperatures will be turning colder later on today or tonight. As for high temperatures this afternoon, the colder readings will be confined to the northeastern states in 30s and 40s, still rather chilly through portions of the mid-Atlantic states in the upper 40s to low 50s and 50s as far south as Georgia, and cool 60s over many sections of Florida. Warming trend beginning to take place in the western sections of the Gulf coastal states, with the warmer readings in the 80s in Southern California and portions of the desert southwest. As for low temperatures tomorrow morning, the colder 20s will be confined to the New England states, 30s through the Middle Atlantic states into portions of the southeast, 40s and 50s over the Gulf Coast and portions of Florida, and it looks like a warming trend beginning to take place through the Rockies, at least along the eastern slopes of the Rockies, and a few pockets of 20s in the Rockies itself, and the warmer 50s expected over the desert southwest, and in the cooler 40s up through the Pacific Northwest. As for tomorrow's weather map, cool air will be moving into the Pacific Northwest, especially the interior regions of Washington and Oregon, as well as portions of Idaho and Montana. Some rain can be expected in those same regions, although there's the possibility that we may see a little snow in the higher elevations of the Rockies. As for Kansas and Texas area, a few widely scattered showers, maybe even a thunder bumper or two through the afternoon, but sunshine and much warmer temperatures through all of the Middle Atlantic and the southeastern states, and warmer air also beginning to move into portions of the northeast. As for high temperatures tomorrow afternoon, the colder 30s will be confined to the extreme northern sections of New England, warming up in the 40s elsewhere in the northeast, and then 50s extending from portions of the Mid-Atlantic states back into the Great Lakes area, 60s extending from Florida back into the central part of the country. A pocket of cool 40s over the eastern sections of the Pacific Northwest, as well as the northern Rockies, and the warm 80s confined to the desert southwest. And at this time tomorrow, we'll take a look at the weekend forecast. See you then, Peter.
Okay, Gordon, get out that snow shovel. Hope to see you back tomorrow. The grocery workers' strike continues for a third day in Cleveland, but for the first time there's some hope for a settlement. A federal mediator has called a meeting for Friday morning in an effort to get the two sides talking. Negotiations between the union and store owners broke down Monday night, and pickets went up at 26 local stores Tuesday morning. The owners retaliated by closing all the unionized markets in the Cleveland area, idling more than 11,000 workers. The sticking point in the contract talks is the issue of job security. The union wants to limit the number of part-time employees to no more than 50%. The grocers want no contractual limits at all. There was also disagreement between the two sides over wages and health insurance. Consumers in the Cleveland area have been forced to shop at non-union grocery stores or to drive to neighboring Summit County, about a half hour away. Congressional negotiators are closing the differences between the Republican and Democratic versions of a budget for fiscal 1988. Some insiders are optimistically hinting that a deficit reduction package will soon be a reality. Members of the House and Senate have been meeting for 2 weeks now in an effort to cut at least $23 billion from the budget for fiscal 1988, which began on October 1st. Both packages, one Republican, one Democratic, cut spending by more than $23 billion, but the Democratic version raises taxes, cuts defense spending, and slices less from domestic spending than the Republican plan. Neither package touches Social Security or federal pensions. President Reagan is expected to endorse any agreement that has bipartisan support, and the financial markets are eager for any plan that would reduce the deficit. Yesterday was a brighter day on Wall Street, and the dollar firmed up a bit. Here's FBN's Jim Webster with all the latest financial news. Jim?
Thanks, Peter. Both the dollar and the stock market posted gains in Veterans Day holiday trading. The dollar firmed up on optimism that the September U.S. trade deficit was lower than in August. Gains were posted in fractions against the yen, the mark, and the pound. The stronger dollar apparently gave traders more optimism on Wall Street, as the market staged a modest but generally broad rebound. All the major indexes were up, with the Dow Jones Industrials ending the day just under 1,900, up 21 points. Volume was nearly 148 million shares. The value of an average share was up 0.32. Gainers outnumbered losers by almost 2 to 1. The New York Exchange Index was up 1.40 to close at 135.5. The NASDAQ index of over-the-counter stocks gained 2.60 to close at nearly 318. And the Amex Composite Index rose 1 3/4 to close at 246.25. On the New York yesterday, the Kellogg Company posted one of the biggest gains of the day. Kellogg gained 3 points to close at 54 3/4. Despite a strike by New York exchange clerks, the market will resume normal trading hours today. It's the first day for normal hours since October 23rd, when the exchanges cut back on trading to give their personnel time to catch up with a big backlog of paperwork from heavy trading volume. In Dublin, California, Lucky Stores Incorporated has divested its Midwest division. Lucky sold its Eagle Food stores to Odyssey Partners, a New York investment firm, for $120 million in other consideration. Lucky Stores chairman John M. Lilly says the funds will help refurbish existing stores and open new stores in the western states and in Florida. The big Chevrolet Maryland bottler, now known as Alico Incorporated, has renegotiated the sale of its food service division. Alico, formerly the Allegheny Beverage Company, sold its Service America Corporation to Servam Corporation. The price was cut to $345 million from the original $450 million. Another big financial transaction that's been affected by market volatility, the proposed leveraged buyout of the Southland Corporation by its majority owners, the Thompson family. After the family's JT Acquisition Corporation said it couldn't raise enough capital from junk bonds in the wake of the new market attitudes, the Southland Corporation stock plunged more than $16 in a single day. Two food companies declared dividends on Wednesday. Gerber Products Company will pay 33 cents a share on December 10th to shareholders of record November 23rd. And Quaker Oats will pay a dividend of 25 cents a share to shareholders of record December 23rd. Payment is January 15th. And finally, a former Secretary of Commerce believes the stock market meltdown last month may have been a blessing in disguise. Peter G. Peterson said in New Orleans on Wednesday that it's a warning to the United States to give up its foolish fiscal ways. Peterson was the architect of a double-page newspaper ad in several papers that urges the Congress and the White House to get serious about the budget deficit. Also signing that ad were CEOs Dwayne Andreas of Archer Daniels Midland, H.B. Atwater Jr. of General Mills, and Kenneth J. Griggy of Wilson Foods, among several others. Peter?
Thank you, Jim. Well, the current trend in food and beverage packaging can be summed up in one word. That word is plastics. According to a survey of food and beverage manufacturers, multi-layer plastic bottles and jars should be the fastest growing packaging material in 1988. The survey, conducted by Packaging Magazine, also showed that materials expected to decline in usage include aluminum foil, cellophane, and glass. Microwavable packaging and single-serve packaging are expected to continue growing in popularity. Safety in packaging will also be a high priority, with 80% of current users indicating they will increase their use of tamper-evident containers next year. Well, when it comes to milk, Americans seem to like it straight from the cow. For the last several years, dairy producers faced with a surplus have been trying to convince the public that ultra-high temperature milk is a convenient alternative to the chilled version. The product, however, has been an utter failure. Ugh. Several companies that manufacture the stuff are going bust. Sarah Schulte has more on the future, or lack thereof, of the UHT milk.
In the early 80s, the food industry in the United States came out with something they believed was going to be a raving success: ultra-high temperature milk, or commonly known as UHT. The process was to produce a commercially sterile product that sustained a shelf life up to 6 months.
It was basically a question of a premium priced product, because the product does cost more to process, particularly the container cost, versus the added convenience of having a product that you could put on the shelf, plus a certain amount of cost savings that come through distribution channel, particularly retailing.
The food industry's great idea turned into a great blunder. Despite a tremendous amount of success with this product in Europe, consumers in America never seemed to pick up on the idea.
That evidently consumers are either not willing to pay the extra cost or object too strongly to the somewhat lower quality flavor.
4 plants in operation producing UHT milk. Currently, there are only 2. Minnesota Senator Rudy Boschwitz, who is a spokesperson for dairy on the Senate Agriculture Committee, is a strong supporter of UHT milk. He recently sold chocolate UHT at the Minnesota State Fair.
I have felt that the dairy industry, which has been an industry of overproduction, needed to spur some additional consumption. And the idea of milk that you can take out camping, or that you can keep in the car, and that you can use without refrigerating and that would stay fresh, just has a lot of applications.
Even though Senator Boschwitz backs UHT milk, the future of this product looks grim. It is only a matter of time before the 2 plants producing the milk in Georgia and California shut down. For the Food Business Network, I'm Sarah Schulte in Washington.
Still to come on Food Business Today, McDonald's feels that it's never too soon to begin building consumer loyalty. That's why one McDonald's outlet in Pennsylvania is offering Gerber's baby food at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And MTV isn't too concerned, but videos are making their way into supermarkets. Not rock and roll, mind you, but videos that show shoppers how to prepare the food.
On the FBN calendar, the Food Industry Association Executives' 60th Annual Convention will be held on the island of Hawaii, November 12th through the 19th. The Private Label Manufacturing Association Store Brands Super Show will go on in Chicago, November 15th through the 18th. The Information Industry Association will sponsor Information Gold Mine, November 18th and 19th in Chicago. The American Meat Institute Quality Assurance Short Course will go on in Ames, Iowa at Iowa State University, November 18th through the 20th. And the American Poultry Association Conference will be held in Claremore, Oklahoma, November 27th through the 30th.
Contrary to the popular saying, chomping on an apple each day may not keep the doctor away. but there's some evidence that it will keep the dentist away. According to Dr. Elaine Stubner, chief of oral surgery at St. Joseph Hospital in Chicago, apples serve as natural toothbrushes. She says that every time you take a bite of an apple, it cleans from the top of the tooth down to the gum. She advises people to eat lots of apples, celery, and other forms of roughage. So, if you can't brush, chomp a little. Not only can you now squeeze tomatoes in supermarket produce departments, you can watch videos about them as well. The latest supermarket marketing technique is aimed at today's TV-oriented consumer. The videos are strategically positioned throughout a store to emphasize a particular product and catch the consumer's eye. As Mark Mooney reports, the idea is catching the attention of more and more supermarket executives.
Retail grocers across the country are trying to turn their produce departments into profit departments, using techniques that would make Marshall McLuhan happy. TV monitors beam messages to consumers from the point of purchase. Surveys show that we hardly rely on shopping lists when we buy. Figures reveal more than 80% of buying decisions are made in-store.
Being an impulse buy, the videotape, the fresh tip tapes, will stop the customer going through, and it will remind them of whatever it is showing on the tape with the display.
Videotape displays have replaced the live food demonstration, and with dramatic results in the sales of some specialty items. Kiwi fruit sales have been sluggish, except where the tapes are viewed by consumers.
One of the retailers tracked maybe a 500% increase in sales the week that the kiwi tape was shown. But the week after, it didn't drop back to pre-tape levels. It dropped back. He was running a 300% increase for the next 3 weeks. And that's with no tape. So evidently the people who tried it liked it.
The tapes present information about food preparation and storage, as well as providing the facts about nutrition and diet. The upshot of the videotape experience in grocery stores so far is that American consumers stand to learn a lot more about preparing meals and getting the most out of their food dollar.
We're very unsure of ourselves in the kitchen. One of the things you find out is that people really are hesitant about trying something because they simply don't know what to do with it. It's very basic. It's not a big thing at all. I don't know what it is, and I don't know how to prepare it, so how can I try it?
Videotape displays have been slow in taking hold in grocery chains, but that may change when managers realize how quickly they can recover their investment. Already, the Beef Industry Council is making moves to provide its members with tapes that tout the diversity of meats and the delightful ways in which they can be served. Mark Mooney for the Food Business Network, Washington.
Americans just love to redeem coupons. Last year, we cashed in $2.75 billion worth, a new all-time high. The record redemption was a 23% increase over 1985, and considering that manufacturers printed up 200 billion coupons, the total broke down to more than 2,000 per household. Half the coupons are found in freestanding newspaper inserts, but researchers say consumers aren't redeeming these as often as they used to. Spending for sales promotions, of which coupons are a large part, now exceeds the amount of money spent for advertising. A situation, incidentally, that alarms much of the ad industry. As the population levels off, industry experts foresee a greater volume and greater redemption rate for coupons, with more and more brands competing for the attention of a stabilizing number of consumers. Later in our Focus segment, we'll look at another new development in supermarkets, the growing trend of using cash register scanners to keep track of inventory, coupons, sales items, and a whole range of information. FBN's Charlotte Nichols will talk with Texas A&M economist Oral Capps, an expert on the subject. That's in our Focus report on technology. The McDonald's Corporation, which never seems to run out of hamburgers or marketing ideas, now appears to be targeting the toddler market. So far, it's only a test, but a McDonald's outlet in Allentown, Pennsylvania, is now serving Gerber baby food, not only at breakfast, but for lunch and dinner as well. It's too soon to predict whether the idea will be adopted by McDonald's 7,000 other franchises. But according to the manager of the Allentown outlet, parents seem pleased. and the customers themselves are reported to be gurgling with satisfaction. Fast baby food makes sense, say industry observers, one of whom comments, "You can't stuff a baby with fries and burgers." Veterans Day commodities trading was light in some markets, but in Chicago, trading was aggressive and futures were up. Commodities reporter Gordon Carlson has details in his report. Gordon?
That's right, Peter. It wasn't the snow, it was in honor of our veterans that several of the cash markets didn't trade yesterday. So our screen is going to have a few not availables on it. As you can see, the only price, or about the only price available in the cash grains, was for number 2 hard wheat, Kansas City, where the close was up 2 cents at $2.81. Soybean oil also was up from 17.39 cents the day before. On the Chicago Board of Trade, however, grain and soybean futures traded up across the board. Aggressive buying tied to export business boosted corn by 1 1/4, soybeans 3 1/4 to 8, and wheat up 2 to 4. Both the production and value of the nation's 10 vegetables have been slowing in recent years. USDA says production has grown only 1% per year in the past 4 years for asparagus, broccoli, carrots, cauliflower, celery, sweet corn, honeydews, lettuce, onions, and tomatoes. From 1970 to 1982, the growth rate for production was 3% per year. On the value side, the growth was 8% annually from 1970 to 1982, only 4% per year since 1982. Weaker exports and lower producer prices are blamed. Yet, in 1986, the value of fresh vegetable production went up 9% to $3.2 billion. Damping the domestic market, imports of fresh vegetables increased dramatically from 1970 to 1986, almost 9% per year. But the market share of imports increased only 1%. Since 1970, per capita use of fresh potatoes has declined, while processed potato consumption has increased. But total use of potatoes has remained about the same. Total potato imports, mostly fresh from Canada, grew 3% per year between 1970 and 1986. For January through August of this year, potato imports already had reached 2.9 million hundredweight, 62% above the same period last year. Sweet potato production in 1986-87 is down 12% to about 13 million hundredweight. This follows a downtrend of about 0.2% per year since 1970. Also, production has shifted from the central Atlantic states into California. Production of mushrooms is up 5% in the 1986-87 growing period. The 17-year trend has been about a 7% per year increase. Use of fresh mushrooms is up 12% per year over the past 17 years, compared to growth for processed mushrooms of only 4%. In the cattle and hog futures yesterday, the December live cattle contract was up 0.27. Live hogs closed at up 0.15, also on the December contract, while pork bellies February contract were up 0.50 at 56.92. Cash coffee was unchanged at $1.18 per pound. Cash cocoa closed up from $2,031 the day before. The November orange juice contract was up a full 10 cents at the close. Sugar cane was up from 0.730. Sugar futures closed up 0.17. Tomorrow, Peter, we'll take a look at the 1987 non-citrus crop that includes major tree fruits, grapes, and cranberries, and in good time for the holidays, too.
Certainly is. We'll look for that one. Thanks, Gordon. Finally this morning, this earth-shattering question. When is a pizza not a pizza? When the U.S. government says it isn't. And according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, a pizza is not a pizza when it doesn't have tomato sauce. That bureaucratic edict is irking Wolfgang Puck, the owner of an exclusive Los Angeles restaurant known as Spago. Featured prominently on the menu is an haute cuisine pizza that costs $11 and is made of sourdough crust, a variety of toppings and sliced tomatoes, but no tomato sauce. Puck wanted to begin marketing a cheaper frozen version of the pizza, but the USDA said he couldn't call the product pizza. To satisfy the bureaucrats here in Washington, Puck has now agreed to add tomato chunks to the basil pesto sauce on the pizzas, and the product may soon find its way to supermarket shelves. USDA regulators say they simply are trying to uphold the law of the land, but Puck says It's ridiculous that people in Washington are trying to tell him what a pizza is. That's all for this morning's edition of Food Business Today. Coming up next, our focus report on technology. Until then, or until tomorrow, I'm Peter Hackus in Washington.
From the Food Business Network, this is Focus on Technology.
Today, in our focus report on technology, we'll take a close look at something that does some looking of its own, the supermarket scanner. Scanners not only tell cash registers how much to charge for an item, but increasingly, they're being used to keep track of inventory and the impact of coupons and sales. An expert on the subject is Oral Capps, an economist at Texas A&M University. FBN's Charlotte Nichols talks with Capps to get the scoop on scanners.
Using the scanning process in your store can improve your operation, the efficiency, and the bottom line, which is usually what it's all about. But what do you do once you have this in your stores? How do you use the information, the wealth of data that's coming in? How do you analyze it? My guest today has some insight on that. He's Oral Capps with Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Charlotte.
What's the biggest challenge for using this information once you have it?
Well, I think most of the retailers realize that they have a huge wealth of data at their disposal. But they also realize that they really don't know what to do with it. And I think they're floundering a bit, not that they couldn't do anything with it, but they really don't know how to get started. And part of that revolves around the fact that maybe they haven't set down priorities as to what they need to get done. They don't know who should get the information. They don't know how timely or how often they should get it. There's just a number of questions that they're just beginning to realize. There's an evolutionary process. I mean, we've had scanners for about 15 years, and I'd say for the first 10, a lot of hard benefits were documented, paying for the investment, improvements in bookkeeping, price accuracy, heck, getting consumers over the fact that perhaps items are not going to be individually priced, although some state legislatures did away with that. But now that scanners are in the mainstream, they've realized paybacks on their investments. They also realize that further improvements in the bottom line as far as gross profit dollars go can be realized. Now they're ready to turn their attention to some other facets.
Let's talk about those facets. How do you look at the information?
Well, probably a four-step procedure. First, realize that informational needs to base decisions are going to vary by management level. A CEO is going to need different information than a merchandiser, than a store manager, than a department manager. And probably the best way to visualize this is a funnel. They're basically looking at the same informational pie, but they're going to be slicing it a little bit differently. A CEO wants a broad perspective, broad brush perspective to look at personnel, advertisement, product mix, and he wants to see it for the whole firm and by zones as well as perhaps individual stores. A merchandiser is probably going to look at the same type of information, but it'll be a little bit more narrowly focused, more emphasis on product selection and product mix. A store manager is interested in just the store operations. He doesn't want to, or he doesn't necessarily need to consider zones or the whole firm. And then the department manager is even more focused still. You know, basically you're interested in gross margins and gross profit dollars, so would a merchandiser and a CEO, but for a specific department. And individual items within that department rather than the whole store, rather than the whole firm. So if you can have in mind a funnel type analogy, realize you got the same informational pie, you're just going to slice it a little bit differently. The challenge is, okay, now that we realize that, what do you do? How do you go about getting relevant information back to these folks. And here's where prioritization of information becomes important. A CEO, has to document what his informational needs are, and then he has to prioritize, rank them. And on that basis, then reports can be developed by scanning coordinators at the store level or at the headquarters level with the chief information officer, and then he could get those reports. Typically, based on our experience, monthly reports for the CEO is about what he needs. A merchandiser needs to identify his key performance areas. When they do that, you look for certain indicators within those areas. That information gets funneled to the chief information officer and scanning coordinator, and he gets that back. And the same goes for the store manager as well as the department manager. Communications up and down the spectrum of the management ladder are important. If you don't have that, you're not going to get off the ground. You also need commitment, obviously. You have to realize that scanning is an investment. Now, what do you do economically with any investment? Well, you have certain goals, typically to maximize returns. The second goal is to develop a plan or plans to conduct those maximizations. And the third is to implement them. Well, what we were focusing on at the conference is developing a plan called a management information system to get the job done. Then once you have commitment, you've got training involved of people throughout the organization, from the front end people and all the managerial people. Everybody should be involved in the training because they need to be aware of how these reports are going to be used. And if there isn't any incentive on their part, then they're not going to do it. Then the last thing is the fact that it's an ongoing process. You just don't set up the system one time and inertia will take over and the job will be okay, that'll be it. It has to be evaluated periodically, so post-implementations evaluations are necessary, an integral part of this. So if you have all of these ingredients, you have a firm foundation to deliver this timely and concise information to decision makers.
What is the management information system specifically?
What is it? It's the design of certain reports based on previously identified key performance areas. A CEO says, okay, I'm mostly interested as my goal and strategy to maximize gross profit dollars or market share. He's identified an area. Then within that area, you identify what is known as a key performance indicator, which is a quantitative measure of are we up to snuff with our key performance area. And there could be a host of those. And then the merchandiser does the same thing, the store manager does the same thing, and so does the department manager. Some key performance areas for a merchandiser would be optimal expenditure patterns for advertising, or optimal product mix, evaluation of new product items. For a store manager, it might be department evaluation, from produce, meat, general grocery, non-foods, you name it. It could also be cashier evaluation, productivity of the cashier. Is she scanning every item as best as possible? What's her amount? What's the amount of time that she's spending in tender? What is the amount of time she's spending with the customers? What's the dollar value per customer going through her register? Labor scheduling is another facet that a store manager would be involved in. A department manager would be interested in the product mix within his department. We call it a category evaluation report. And that's his broad key performance area, and then there are certain indicators under that. Gross profit dollars by item, movement information by item. Might be interested in slow movers, large movers, so you would set up exception reports. That is, the top 100 movers in this department, the bottom 100 movers, and it has implications for shelf space allocation and product mix, obviously. So again, the key here, aside from communication, is identification of areas and use of indicators to evaluate those areas, and the commitment and training that goes along with that. And it's important too, because you've got 20,000 at a minimum or so UPCs, and there's no way somebody can pull off every piece of information and store it on a data bank. I mean, I think eventually that the time will come, but for right now, you have to do it in piecemeal fashion. And there are some forward-looking stores who are using personal computers. Well, if you're going to do that, you download from a mini or a mainframe. You can't download 20,000 pieces of information. And working with scanner data, I wish I could coin this phrase or take credit for it, but it's like trying to take a drink from a fire hydrant. So unless, you can ferret out in advance what it is you want, you're going to be inundated with information.
In your position, you've done a lot of analysis of firms around the country that are using scanning. What's been the most common problem area that you've been able to identify?
Well, part of the common problem is that there's no accord on what is the key performance area. Or there hasn't been enough communication, I suppose, to decide on what constitutes a good report for me. I think that's changing a little bit. They're doing some thinking on that. They realize that some improvements in the bottom line can occur, but until they come to some sort of an accord, it typically will not happen. Although, as I said, I think that's changing some. Another problem is they are caught up in their day-to-day activities and probably don't have much residual time left. And some thinking can only take place if you set aside some time in order to get the job done. And I think they've got so many different things going on within the retail store operations that concentrating on one area becomes different. There's DSD, and we haven't even, or that's direct store delivery, we haven't even touch that, so to speak, or integrate it with point-of-sale information, which by and large is what I'm talking about. The information management system that I'm describing is really a system within a broad set of systems. And there may not even be any agreement as to whether or not POS is the most important system or DSD or some other. It's just going to depend from one firm to the next. They realize, though, that something can be done. And I think that was the big motivation here. And I dare say some retailers were here at this conference just to see where they were in the mainstream. Well, am I on target? Am I below average, or am I above average? And if they're above average, they want to stay above average. If they perceive themselves as below average, well, they want to get up to speed. So I think the conference was able to allow them to make that gauge, and probably there isn't as much going on in the way of merchandising using scanner data as maybe they've been led to believe, that they're all basically in the same boat. But in order to maintain a competitive edge or fear that they may lose some customers if they don't, then they better channel some resources into getting the job done.
Of course, there's benefits. So what are the efficiency gains?
Instead of people going around and stamping an individual item, now they could be doing something else. So I would free up time to do other things, yes, to become more efficient. But I think the efficiency gains, which have been documented more or less as hard benefits, I think most of the firms who are into scanning, that was the first thing that they tried to get, and I think they've gotten it. Now in that evolutionary process that I described, they're ready now to do something else. They've enjoyed the benefits of the improvements in the bottom line, and a lot of them realize now, and I think it was evident with some of the presentations, that even more improvement in the bottom line could occur. So as well as efficiency, the strive to increase gross profit dollars or net profitability in general is another important source of motivation to conduct some of these analyses.
You're a company that's out there and you perceive yourself to be above average, sort of on the breaking edge of what's been happening with scanning information. How do you get better? How do you get a little more edge than the next guy?
You keep on going. You don't stop. I don't think any one firm has reached the limit as to what they can possibly do. Then they've obviously undergone some learning. On the learning curve, and perhaps they can do things much more efficiently now because they've learned what needs to be done. I think by participating in some of these activities, an issue that was prevalent in the conference was the quality of scanned data. Well, unless you try to use the data, you won't have any idea as to how good the quality is. And if you're going to be basing decisions on the scanned data and you haven't looked at scanned data quality, well, you could be in serious trouble. I know we've worked with some data from retail food stores, and in one instance we had Holly Farms chicken selling at $9,999 cents. $10,000 a pound. Well, there was obviously plenty of movement, so there had to be some sort of error going on. We also had some with zero prices. Surely could understand the movement then, but you know, people were not selling it at zero price. They weren't selling it at $10,000 a pound as a price. So there are obviously outliers or data problems in that, and a few instances were documented by some of the commentators today at the conference. I think the more you work with the scan data in these applications, the better the quality of the data will come. And but if you wait around till you get 100% quality, people have blown by you. So if you're on top of it, continue to be on top of it, and I think to do otherwise would be rather foolish.
It really is a challenge helping people to use scanning information correctly, and we appreciate your tips and suggestions today. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Charlotte.
And that's our Focus Report today on technology. I'm Peter Hackus in Washington. See you again tomorrow.